In this video we're going to look at non-finite verb forms. Up till now we've looked at past and present, the two finite verb forms, but there actually are four more forms that verbs can occur with, and these are called the non-finite verb forms. And in the first place we find the full infinitive, and that is a to plus the verb, so something like John likes to mow. Then we have the bare infinitive, which is just the verb by itself, so it's the infinitive without to. Something like I can mow, and mow is the bare infinitive form. We've got an ing form where the name gives away what it is, so that's the verb plus an ing at the end. Something like Anne is mowing. Yeah, sometimes people refer to this as the gerund. And then the fourth one is called the participle or participle. Different people pronounce that differently, and that is, it takes different forms. We can find a participle with an N at the end or an EN, so as in Paul has mown the lawn, but we also find participle forms with ED, so then they look like past tenses but they aren't. Or we get irregular verb participle forms. Let's look at these different forms in a bit more detail. So in the first place we've got the full infinitive, and just remember to be or not to be, yeah? Those are full infinitive. That's a full infinitive form of the verb. So it's always to plus verb, so you get to sing, to dance, to think, to watch, to resemble. And to test for this you could use the test frame I want. So I want, and then you have to say to sing. You can't say I want sing or I want singing. And so it's I want to sing, I want to dance, I want to think, I want to watch, I want to resemble, etc. Okay, the bare infinitive is just the verb without any ending at all. And it often follows a modal auxiliary, so something like I can eat, I must eat, I may eat, I will eat, I shall eat, I could eat, I might eat, I would eat, I should eat. And so you can use that as a test frame. I will ... So if you fill it in there, I will eat. That's the bare infinitive. The ing form is easy because it ends in ing, and we find that it often follows a form of to be. So Mary is singing, John was sleeping, we have been watching that movie, I hope to be graduating at the end of this year, I may be cycling to work tomorrow. So as a test frame you can use I am ... Yeah, I am singing. As I said before, the most complicated of the non-finite forms is the participle form, because it can take different forms. It can be en or ed at the end, or it can be a completely irregular form. And it usually follows a form of the verb to have, and sometimes of to be. To be is when it's used in a passive sentence. So something like Mary has shown me her drawing. So here it follows has, and we see that shown is show plus an N. Yeah. John has walked 10 miles in one day. Again followed, the participle follows has, and it's walk plus ed. We had drunk a bottle of wine when he arrived. Now here we find an irregular form. So you've got drink for present tense, drank for past tense, and drunk in the participle form. The thief was arrested by the police. Here we see a participle form of arrest following was, and this is a passive sentence, so we could say the police arrested the thief was arrested by the police. So it's a useful test frame for seeing if you're dealing with a participle, is to say I have ... I have shown, I have walked, and what follows have then is a participle. Okay, you have to be very careful with the participle because, of course, that ed at the end of a verb can also express past tense. So there's a difference between she finished her work or she has finished her work. So remember where the first finite verb goes. The finite verb is the leftmost verb in the sentence. Now the first one, she finished her work, yeah, there's only one verb, so that must be the finite verb because every sentence needs a finite verb. Now because you can say yesterday there, it must be past tense. Now in the second sentence there are two verbs, has and finished, and that means that the leftmost verb is has, and that must then be finite. And in fact, remember, has is the present tense form of to have. Yeah, past tense would be had. Now, because finished follows the finite verb, it can't be finite itself, and so it must be a participle and not a past tense. Yeah, so in the first sentence it's past tense, she finished her work. In the second sentence, finished is a participle because it follows the present tense finite verb has. Okay, let's try one. You must learn all this by heart. Is learn here present or past or non-finite? Well, first of all, you then need to work out how many verbs there are. Well, you've got must and you've got learn. So there are two verbs. The leftmost one is must, so that must be the finite verb. It's one of these modal auxiliaries and we consider it present tense. So that means that learn must be non-finite. So then we can try putting it in these frames. I want to learn, so that doesn't work. Yeah, this would be I want to learn. So learn here is not full infinitive. I am learn doesn't work because it would be I am learning, so it's not an ing form, which you can also see because there is no ing ending. I have learned doesn't work. You would say I have learned, so again this is not a participle form, but you can say I will learn, and that was the test frame for bare infinitive forms of verbs. So because that works, learn here must be a bare infinitive form, and that the test frame was a modal auxiliary, which is what we have here as well. You must learn. Okay, try another one. In Bill has emailed Sue. What is emailed? Well, again, there are two verbs here, has and emailed. So the finite verb must be the leftmost one, that's has, yeah, not emailed. So emailed can't be finite, and has, of course, is the present tense form of to have, and emailed must be non-finite. So then we can try it again. I want would be to have, to email, sorry, I want to email, I am emailing, I will email, I have emailed. Yeah, with these four test frames, we find that it only fits into the last one, and that was the test frame for participles. So emailed must be in participle form here. And Mary was approached by an agent. What's approached? Well, first we start again thinking how many verbs? Well, there's was and approached, so two verbs. So the leftmost one is the finite one, so that must be was. Now you could say yesterday Mary was approached, so it's past tense, yeah. Present tense would be is approached. So that's the finite verb, is was, so approached must be non-finite, so we try it again in the test frame. I want would be to approach, I am approaching, I will approach, I have approached. Again, this is the only test frame that you can fit approached in, so it must be a participle form. And in fact, this sentence is again a passive sentence, which you can tell from that by phrase here. So Mary was approached by an agent, an agent approached Mary. Okay, so that's another participle. Let's try one more. Anne divided the cake into pieces. Here we've got divided, and it's only one verb. There's only one verb, not more. There are no more verbs in this sentence. You can in fact work out all the word categories in this sentence by now. Yeah, and there is no other verb. So that means if there's only one verb, then that verb must be the finite one. You could say yesterday Anne divided the cake into pieces, so divided must be past tense, yeah, and there is no non-finite verb form in this sentence. Okay, so I hope that you get a little bit the hang of how to look at verbs and decide what form they take. So far we've seen 2 verbs in a row. In fact, you can combine different non-finite verbs to make longer stretches of verbs. So you could say something like, we have been singing. Now the first or the leftmost verb is always the finite one, so that's have here. And of course, although it talks about something that happened in the past, have as a verb form is present, yeah, because the past would be we had been singing. And then we see that have, yeah, is followed by been. Okay, so that must be a non-finite form, and because it fits into the test frame, you know, I have been, it must be a participle. Now, being itself is a form of to be. It's followed here by singing. Yeah, I am singing, we have been singing, so singing, of course, is an ing form, and you can see that because it ends in that ing. Now, you see that there is a particular order in which these verbs have to combine. We can't change it around, so we can't start with a form of to be and then to have and then have a form of sing. So we are having sung doesn't work. Yeah. Now, one thing we haven't talked about yet is how do we talk about the future? And in the previous video lecture I said, well, there is no future tense in English, and what I meant by that is there is no particular verb form that expresses the future. When we want to talk about the future in English, we actually have to use particular constructions with particular verbs. So one way of doing that is to use a modal verb. And the modal verb we use is will. So we can say something like, he will visit Anne next week. Now, what we've got there is will, which is present tense, followed by visit, which is a bare infinitive. But the whole sentence, the whole construction is used to talk about the present. Now, if you're more certain about this happening, yeah, you can also use the construction here. I am going to visit Anne soon. Again, what you have is a construction with a present tense verb, am, and then we've got this ing form, going, and then a full infinitive form. So we're using present tense, but the whole sentence actually talks about the future. And you can actually talk about the future just by using a form of to be with an ing form. So you can say, in fact, I am visiting her this afternoon. And again, am is present, visiting is an ing form. Yeah? So we see to talk about the future, we actually use a construction with several verbs where the finite verb is always present. Okay. Now, if you have a look on StudyNet, you can find a flow diagram that you can actually use to work out what the form of a verb is in a particular sentence by following the step-by-step approach on that diagram. I hope that is of help. Bye.